What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 156 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Over the last few days, I've been talking about different installments of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic book series, and today I'm going to talk about another installment of that series. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Century Part 2, 1969. That's the summer that I got my first real six-string. This is by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, and this is from Top Shelf Productions and Knockabout. Two separate companies both producing this series ever since it moved away from Wildstorm. And this particular volume continues the subplot of the League trying to prevent the rise of the Moonchild, who is this Antichrist being created by this Aleister Crowley stand-in called Oliver Haddo. And he is from a novel actually written by Aleister Crowley, and basically Haddo's cult continues their activities into the late 60s, and they have this band called the Purple Orchestra, I think, which is a stand-in for the Rolling Stones, and basically Haddo, he has continued his lifespan by possessing younger sorcerers so that he can basically live forever by jumping into younger bodies, and he is going to try and jump into the body of the Mick Jagger equivalent, and he is basically just trying to continue his cult's activities and trying to create the Moonchild. We find out that Haddo's cult was sort of involved with Rosemary's Baby, which is a movie from the late 60s, I think, and basically Alan, Orlando, and Mina, they are the only remnants of the League by this point, which you would know if you have read the Black Dossier. By this point, these three, they have separated themselves from MI5. They are no longer affiliated with the British government. The British government is not to be trusted after the events of the war. You had the Big Brother program from 1984, and while all of that has gone away, these guys still don't trust the government, so now they are taking their orders from Prospero, from I believe The Tempest, from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and basically their mission remains the same, but their boss is different, and their attitude is very different also. This book is much, much better than 1910. My big problem with 1910 was that the League themselves didn't feel very important. Basically, everything they did in Volume 1 all came to nothing, and everything that was important in that book was this side character, Janny Dakar, who was Captain Nemo's daughter. We find her here at the very beginning of this book, and this is like 50 years after the events of the first book. Now she has a grown daughter and a grandson who looks like he's maybe 9 or 10 years old. So quite a bit of time has passed, quite a bit has happened in between these two volumes, and a lot of it is still empty spaces that we, as the audience, don't really know a whole lot about. But she is now on much better terms with Mina, Alan, and Orlando than she was when she left at the end of Volume 1 of this series. And these three now are on their own. They are trying to stop the rise of this Moonchild, and once again, everything here kind of boils down to nothing really matters.
Never open myself this way. Life is ours, we live it our way. All these words I don't just say, and nothing else matters.
Everything that they try to do doesn't really end up affecting anything. They're not able to stop Haddo's cult. It's sort of a Pyrrhic victory, if you will. This book really is all about Mina trying to come to terms with being an immortal. And she's technically been an immortal for a while now, but up until now, it hasn't really bothered her. But at this point, she's kind of starting to go through a little bit of a psychotic break. Not really, but sort of. She's basically just stressing out over the fact that she is going to live forever, and she's trying to keep up with the times, and Alan and Orlando are kind of laughing at her. Orlando especially, who's like 3,000 years old at this point, he's saying, you know, don't act like you're all hip and everything because you're really into this new music and stuff. He says, I prefer music that's played on a harpsichord. And he talks about stuff from his past, and he basically says, nothing really changes, none of this is going to matter, these people are just nostalgic for their childhood, which is very ironic coming from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because pretty much everything in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill actually like is them being nostalgic for their childhood. Anything that came after a certain point, they are not very kind to. James Bond, later we will see Harry Potter, the character Tom Swift from the early 20th century. These are characters that Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill do not like, and these are all characters that came after their youth. So it's really interesting to me that in this book we have Orlando basically chiding all of the hippies of the Love generation for being nostalgic for their childhood, when that's exactly what Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill are doing in this series. But whatever. I really like the character stuff here a lot more than in 1910. I really like Mina's arc that she goes through, where she's trying to beat this whole immortality thing. She's obviously going to live forever, so she's trying to make it work for herself. It's kind of driving her a little bit crazy. I really like the relationship between Orlando, Alan, and Mina here. We get little bits and hints of it in the Black Dossier and 1910, but here it's much more explored, and I think it works better because here we only have 3 main characters. We don't have an entire league that we're having to split among 80 pages. In the previous volume, you had characters like A.J. Raffles and Thomas Carnacki and Orlando and Mina and Alan, and then you bring in Mycroft Holmes, and you've got Janny Descartes taking up quite a bit of space. So all these characters aren't really able to do anything just in the span of 80 pages. Here, we only have 3 members of the League that are having to split time with each other, and so they all get more to do, and I think that works out a lot better. We've also got a character played by Michael Caine from the movie Get Carter from the 60s, and he's kind of on his own separate quest, and it's kind of sort of the opposite of 1910. In 1910, we had a side character who wasn't really affiliated with that current version of the League, but she felt more important than the League characters. Whereas here, Jack Carter from the movie Get Carter, he's here, and what he does is very important in this particular volume, but he doesn't overshadow the rest of the League characters, and I really like that. He's there, and he's doing stuff that's important, but he is not the most important character in this book. As far as references, I've been talking about this quite a while, at least since my review of the Black Dossier. A lot of these references, once again, they went way, way over my head. Some of them I actually understood. Some of them I recognized at least visually. If you're a fan of British pop culture from the 60s, you are probably going to want to read this, but there's also references to a lot of other stuff. We get some references to Dracula, Mr. Hyde, we get the Phantom at one point, which is a very weird scene that's kind of sort of an acid trip going on. We get a lot of unexpected references here. A lot of them I actually recognize, and some of them, many, many, many more, I did not. But overall, I would definitely recommend this one, at least over 1910. It's definitely superior to that one. I'm not sure if it's better than the earlier versions of the League. I would say that it's even better than the Black Dossier. It actually has a story here where the Black Dossier was basically a really long chase scene with extended behind-the-scenes footage of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and their history. So I think this is probably the best that the League has been since the end of Volume 2, which was like a good 10 years before this one came out. I really like this one a lot. It's much better than the previous 2 stories from this world. So that's all that I have to say about 1969. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow to talk about another book. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.